David Genford is the head of the Education Union and joins us this morning. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Leon. How are you?
I'm well. David, you've heard the plan. You've had a chance to think about it over the last 12 hours. Are teachers ready to get back to class for 2022 on the basis of what you've heard?
First of all, I think it's good that the plan's out there. I think that's what we called for, and now we can see it, and now we need to really examine it and have some true consultation with how we can make this plan work. There are definitely still some concerns that we have, that we want to make sure that we're making schools as safe as possible, not just doing the bare minimum to make sure that schools open. And our concern will also be that if we do the bare minimum, you're going to see a greater increase of staff sickness, which will lead to the possibilities of schools being unable to remain open.
The Premier says that there are lots of fill-in teachers in reserve if and when teachers are able to come to their main class. Do you believe those assurances?
I don't believe the numbers he's quoting. I think he said 1,700 in his press conference yesterday. I know I've travelled to schools around the state, and when I go in and I say, "Oh, so how is it with relief teachers?" I get a look on the face of people like, "You're kidding, aren't you?" Like they can't find them especially if you head 20 minutes outside of a city centre, and even the schools in city centres are finding it difficult to find relief teachers. So where were these 1,700 teachers last year? He talks about 400 retired teachers that are going to be accessible. I know people when they enter retirement, they're looking forward to their retirement. They're not going to go, okay, well, let's go back into schools where we can't guarantee we're going to be completely safe. So I think that needs to be reconsidered, that we don't have that supply of teachers that the Premier thinks we do. And I think he really needs to speak to the principals that are trying to find staff. One southern school told me this week there's still 6 teachers short for the start of the year, let alone relief teachers.
Well, hang on. So 6 foundation teachers, 6 actual class teachers short for the start of the school year?
Yep, so they're still trying to find those teachers. So when you're in a school, it's considered hard to staff because maybe there's some behavioural issues or kids are just a little bit more difficult. It's harder to attract teachers, and the government doesn't have a plan to help those schools out. And then when you find relief teachers on top of that, it becomes an impossible task. There needs to be some type of funding for extra relief coordination, or let's actually see where these teachers are. I spoke to someone yesterday and they said, I think I'm on that list and I haven't taught in 15 years. Like, what actually, where are these teachers? And let's actually make sure they're real and don't just quote numbers, because when a school's trying to find a teacher, a promised number isn't going to mean anything.
How much curriculum is going to get taught in the first, say, 4 months of 2022?
I think our teachers and all our educators in schools, teacher assistants, all our help, showed during previous COVID times the flexibility of what they're able to do when given the chance to do it. I think what's important is that the knowledge they have and the awareness they have of what's important for a student at those ages, of what's the crucial things they need to learn, and that will probably be the focus, I would assume, to make sure that's what they're learning. The department has promised that they've got a virtual learning centre set up and ready to go in regards to people that will need to be at home. So if someone needs to isolate for 7 days, they'll have access to work through this virtual learning centre. What we want to make sure happens is that is actually well-staffed, that the information in there has been vetted and that it will be beneficial for students, because some students won't be able to access that easily. I think I saw a comment somewhere that students will have access to a device at home. Well, how does that happen? Who's responsible for it? So a lot of the plan was very overarching yesterday. There's a lot of organisational stuff that we need to focus on going forward. The minutiae of how schools are actually going to do what the government promises that's going to be done.
What if a teacher feels that their classroom isn't properly ventilated and they don't feel safe to teach in it? What then?
Ventilation is one of our biggest concerns, probably our biggest concern from this announcement. The research shows the best way to stop COVID is vaccination and then ventilation. Now, at the moment, we've got the Department and Public Health basically telling us that they're both happy with what each other's doing, but no one can actually tell me what's been done. All I know is there's been an external window audit. I think you had a glazier on your program after me earlier in the week who said it's almost an impossible task to get done what they say is going to be done. But has there actually been any measurements in classrooms of ventilation? We'd like to see carbon dioxide monitors used to actually see. We don't need them in classrooms all the time. That's public health is concerned that you use that instead of opening windows. We just want measurements done so we can reassure people that either the air purifiers work in classroom or the external windows being open works. Because at the moment, there's a lot of confusion and anxiety amongst our members and parents that are coming to me that there won't be adequate ventilation.
Your mornings around Tasmania. Hey, if you're a retired teacher, you've been out of the workforce for a year, 2 years, 5 years. Have you been contacted? Have you been asked about your availability to provide relief, to bring your experience back to the classroom for school year 2022 if required? I'd love to hear from you this morning. 1300 222 936 is the number. Can you give me a call? Will you be willing to pick up the cudgels again? I was going to say the duster, but I think that's a thing of the past. Will you be prepared to get back in the classroom and help out if asked? Have you been asked already about your availability? 1300 222 936. I'd love to hear from you. The Premier said yesterday, children living with disability and in the school system, their parents will be contacted between now and the start of the school year to talk about their plan. Is that practical? Are you confident that can happen? Will it be teachers making those calls?
That's the great question, because it's contacted by who? At the moment, teachers are scheduled to go back on the 7th of February. You're not going to contact 4,000 parents in 2 days when you've also got your normal planning on top of that you need to get ready for school for. So it's just going to fall on principals who are already, I've already had principals returning to work now. So they've had to end their holidays short because they want to get back, make sure that their school's ready for a COVID plan. Does that mean now they have to do extra work in these coming weeks contacting these parents? Is the department going to contact? We don't know. I was pleased to see the Premier mention students with a disability. They've been almost ignored for the last few weeks. We need to make sure that our most vulnerable people in schools are safe. Now, these are students with a disability. We also have staff in schools who are either immunocompromised or caring for people who are immunocompromised. What extra support is going to be provided for them to make sure that they're going to be safe as well? So it's great to see they're mentioned, but again, how is it actually going to work? Because you can promise something, but to actually do it is going to be something different.
You're on Mornings Around Tasmania. What have you heard from retired teachers about their readiness to step back into the classroom, David Genford?
I haven't had a flood of people letting me know they're ready to put their hand up. I think that relief teachers are concerned. At the moment, there's been no announcement of what support they're going to get in regards to if they get sick, because a relief teacher isn't on a contract. So if they get sick, there's no sick leave for them. But you're asking them to go into an environment where people have had COVID, people are getting COVID. How are we going to support them over the long term? So is there a plan for relief teachers? So retired teachers would come in as relief teachers. What's in it for them? Why are they going to do it? And how are we going to support them if they get unwell in the workplace? So it's ventilation and the relief staff is probably the key things that we really need to go through, and we're willing to consult with the government. We're not at loggerheads with them. We want to discuss this. We want to actually come up with ideas together. We think there should be better masks in schools for staff. We think that they should look at the P2 and N95 masks, and if they need to get fitted, let's look at what we need to do to get them fitted to make sure they're safe, because if we can keep more staff in schools, that's going to be a greater opportunity for schools to stay open and the learning to continue.
Well, I've got two teachers now telling me there's one potential issue. That teachers have to be registered. I'm a retired teacher, and like many have let my registration lapse, says a listener this morning. Like many others, COVID won't be making me change my plans. And then TRB says, using retired teachers, it will depend on whether they've kept their teacher registration. Can you explain how that issue will work, and if there'll need to be special exemptions made for teachers whose registrations have elapsed, David?
Yeah, it's a great point. We're told on average, I think it's 4 weeks for a registration to be approved. So if your registration is lapsed, you can't just walk into a classroom. You need to get approved. So, and there's good reasons for that. There needs to be the police checks. There needs to be making sure the qualifications are up to date. All those types of things that need to be done. So unless the government comes up with an announcement of more money or more people put into the TRB to actually to go through those applications, then that's something that would need to be looked at. So that's the type of question that we're getting from our members that we put forward to the department. That whilst if they keep talking to us, we can put that to them, because some things that might not have been thought about. When a premier says that, we saw Scott Morrison come up with a silly statement yesterday. And then he spoke to industry and found out, oh, surprise, 16-year-olds can't drive forklifts. Well, we can come up with some ideas and information for the Premier and the government to make for that exact type of example. Retired teachers, if they're not registered, can't just walk in off the street. What are you going to do to fix that, and what's the plan?
On Mornings Around Tasmania, final issue, it was the one first raised by our two principals that we talked to earlier in the week, that they wanted to know about the definition of close contact, and that's now been defined. Are you happy with the idea that students will only be sent home if there are 5 COVID cases within 7 days in any given classroom? Is that the definition you are looking for?
What I would like to see is a clear explanation as to why that's the definition. I'm as a layperson who doesn't have any scientific background. If my son sits in a classroom with someone for the whole day without a mask on, because he's in primary school, and the person next to him has COVID, he's not considered a close contact. Why is that different in a classroom setting compared to the 4 hours that's being used in a public setting? These are especially in the primary school where they're not wearing masks and they haven't been fully vaccinated. So if that is the close contact definition, I would like to have a clear explanation as to why, so that when my members come to me and say, what's the reason, I can actually give them that reason. So I know the close contact definition keeps changing from day to day, and we're 2.5 weeks away from school going back. So it could change again. And I think the plan can change again, and that's okay to change the plan, but let's make sure we do it so that it's in a safe way, that it's clear for parents and teachers and all educators to understand why we're doing it this way, and we can do our best to keep schools open, but more importantly, to keep our students learning so that they don't miss out over this time.
You're on Mornings Around Tasmania. David Genford's our guest this morning, Tasmanian President of the Australian Education Union. David, just a final question then. Can I get you to put your teacher's hat back on rather than your union hat? Most parents passionate about their school want to support their teachers, their allied staff and their principals. How can we be good parents in the lead up to school returning in ways that support our school through the inevitable challenges of making this all work? What's your advice to parents right now about looking after their school?
I think in the lead up to going back, we need to make sure that it might be contacting politicians to ask for further examples, to show them that this is important. Often politicians won't act unless they get a flood of calls saying, well, what about this? What about this? So we need to make sure that they know it's important that our schools are safe when they're opened. I think once schools are opened, it's really important that we are really conscious of keeping children home that have got symptoms that could be COVID. I think that unfortunately, I know that's going to be difficult. I've got 3 kids myself. That when you need to go to work and a child has symptoms, your work's going to suffer. But we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing by the community to actually, if you've got symptoms, do the right tests, keep them at home, and make sure we're doing our best to keep things safe. We need to work through this together, and that's what we're prepared to do.
Appreciate you talking with us this morning.
Cheers. Thanks, Leon.
David Genford, Head of the Australian Education Union.